Hello, ji, assalamu alaikum. This is Hashim Barraq. Welcome everyone to this fourth meeting on Cybersecurity Special Interest Group. I welcome you all. Some of you I see are from the past sessions. In these sessions, we focus on one of the key technology areas. Today, we have with us Dr. Saad Malik from Namal University and Abbasi, who is the vice president for cybersecurity at SPS. Today we're focusing on implementation of a cybersecurity framework from NIST, which is the sort of the standard setting body of US, and we'll explore in the form of a panel discussion how that can be done. And this panel discussion will be led by Dr. Saad Malik, and but we'll be welcoming any questions that anybody in the audience, in case they want to ask Nouman anything related to cybersecurity or NIST framework for that matter. Uh, we do have a question and answer session at the end, so you are welcome to join. Share your comments in that part also. Also, will be those of you who are joining from the past, you may find some repetitions, but it's important that we take the audience who are the new members specifically along with us, along with the old members. I'll wait for a minute for Dr. Arshad to join. I know he was going to join today, but I'll just give him a minute and then we can start.
Assalamu alaikum, Hashim. Why don't we have a quick round of introductions while we are waiting? We have Idris Kothari and Mohammed Azeem.
Gee, I'm planning to have that. I was going to call Dr. Arshad and see. So yes, we can certainly have that. Just give me a minute and then.
Sure.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Walaikum salam. Yes, sir.
Chale, very nice.
So we just started this session, and we have three items on our agenda. We'll of course hear from you on some of the things that you are leading for SPINN Labs and your vision. And then we have with us Dr. Saad and Nouman Abbasi from SPS, and they will be having a sort of a panel discussion where audience is also welcome to join in and to elaborate on implementation of cybersecurity framework from NIST with a focus on the university environment. And after that, we'll have an open forum. So with this, I'll hand it over to Dr. Arshad. Sir, if you would want to share with the audience, over to you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, welcome everyone. Thank you very much. This is excellent forum. One of the things which I have already been talking about is that cybersecurity is taking a central role. Even I would say to the extent of national security. अगर आप लोगों को याद हो कि very recently there had been a ransom attack in Texas. और अपेरेंटली तो वो $5 million उनको पे करके they were able to access the password, but in reality they have paid over $20 million. और जो फ्यूचर की जो जंगें होंगी उसमें भी because the systems are more and more software based and remote controlled, so उसमें और ज़्यादा इन चीज़ों का वो है, even to an extent के जो water control systems हैं, electricity है, all these networks require certain kind of software based control system. और you can imagine कि अगर ये control somebody else has it and you are getting it at somebody else's wish, so what will be life? That is why it is very important for Pakistan to create this knowledge base as well as skill set. And in my opinion, universities are the best place जहाँ पे नॉलेज भी जनरेट होता है और मैं तो ये भी एडवाइस करता हूँ और मैंने once I was at NUST I had started this कि जो courses पढ़ाए जा रहे हैं every course has some skill set related to it और जो भी बड़े vendors हैं इनकी certifications available हैं तो while students are already doing certain course why not कि वो 2-4 certifications भी उनके हाथ में हो which will provide them edge as compared to other applicants which are available in the market और जब इसको अगर larger scale पे देखें तो whatever is available in the world so that is what my suggestion is और हमारी ये effort भी इसी direction में है कि how we can help create opportunities for the people even at this point in time अगर आप गार्टनर रिपोर्ट को सर्च करें तो 300,000 security professions are required immediately and over a period of next 3 years close to 1 million people are required in US alone तो आप अंदाजा लगाएं कि बाकी जगहों पे requirements क्या होंगी so with that I hand over back to Hashim for the team to take it forward and I wish कि हम इसमें जितनी भी opportunities create कर सके that will be beneficial not only for the individual but at the national level also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. So before we move on to the next agenda item, as Dr. Saad has requested, I just want to go over the audience that we have. Do we have someone who has experience and maybe academic or industry specific to cybersecurity? And if you have, we would welcome for you to unmute yourself and share with the rest of us as to your experience in cybersecurity.
Hi, this is Idris. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning or good evening. My name is Idris Kothari. I'm based in Silicon Valley, California. And I have little experience in cybersecurity. We actually created the first hardware-based VPN in a company that was called VPNet. And VPNet was acquired by Avaya. Most of the Avaya's cyber accelerators, we call them, were the first generation of cyber accelerators were built at VPNet, and I'm one of the founders of the VPNet. I'm from India Engineering University in Karachi from the 70s, and currently I am working on a cybersecurity project in Pakistan under a company named Vasona Systems International. So thank you very much for letting me join the meeting.
Sure. Thank you very much, Idrisa. Anybody else would like to share your cybersecurity experience? All right then. Over to you, Dr. Saad.
Thank you very much, Hashim. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes.
Let me share the screen. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. And I welcome Idris Saab to this panel as well. And we would be looking forward to your question answers and deep insight to this discussion as well, in addition to Nouman. Nouman is joining us from USA. Thank you very much, Nouman, for taking so much time. Dr. Arshad Saab, as usual, thank you very much for your time because I know you are short of time mostly. Actually, before we formally begin some question answer session, I just wanted to have some fun facts shared with you. I don't know. I just stumbled upon the term cyberspace. I was searching on the net, who coined this term cyberspace first. And believe me, I was shocked to see that the term cyberspace was not originated by digital gurus or or people working in the computer science industry or the computer engineering industry. Actually, cyberspace was coined by artists back in 1968 or 70s, and they wanted to expand their living areas in a way that general architects would not allow them to. So they just they just expressed their views in the form of art, and they basically termed that extra space as cyberspace. And the exhibition that was show marking their paintings was themed at what's happening in the world at that time. So the creators were Suzanne Ussing and her husband, architect Carsten Hoff. Suzanne unfortunately died in 1998, and Carsten Hoff is still alive. And if you look at that picture, so the man standing in front of that crack is basically trying to expand his space, which is not what is generally seen in architectural world. So the space is unusual, and it provides you ample of mindset to bring in a lot of creativity. So when asked in 2015, what was the idea between cyberspace, he stated that the idea was just simply managing spaces, and we were talking about physical concrete spaces at that time. However, in 1980s, the cyberspace, cyberspace which we know today, was coined by William Gibson in his sci-fi novel published in 1980s in Neuromancer. And this novel actually depicts what the world is today now, back in 1980s. And this was astonishing for me. Okay. I will highly recommend, if you get an English version of this novel, please share with us, and I would love to read this novel. Achha. Furthermore, I stumbled upon the term cyberpunk. Now, cyberpunk was the term used in 1980s to denote a hacker who would just go into systems and hack it. And this term was coined by Mr. Bruce in his short story, Cyberpunk, and the excerpt is shared with you in the blue background. Now, if you read this excerpt, this is the starting part. So there's a guy who was up all night, and when he went to the breakfast table in the morning, and his mom and dad said, "Good morning, Mikey. You were up so late last night. I thought I would see you before you caught your bus." And he said, had a tough program to crack. Remember, we are talking about 1980s, and in 1980s, personal computers were not developed yet. So there were terminals over there, and the author, Mr. Bruce, had the vision that smaller, efficient, more powerful terminals would be available to the youth in the future, in which they can actually manipulate cyberspace. There are some other excerpts from the same story. I just happened to read this. It is, I think, 5-10 pages. It's a very short story, but it's so interesting that it gave me the idea. It made me think that how hackers have developed their mindset in cyberspace, and it is a highly recommended story for everybody in this panel, as well as everybody who's interested in cybersecurity or cyberspace working, to get to know the mindset of hackers. Now, if you read this short excerpt, Rhino is one character in that story who's a friend of Mikey's, and they do a job, and Rhino ordered up a smart cab. A smart cab is a concept which was given in 1980s, and we piled out of buddies, a friend of theirs. No more riding the transits for us. We were going Insta. We charged the smart cab off to some law company and cruised all over East Side. Now, the main point I would like to highlight is we charged the smart cab off to some law company. That means they paid online, but they tabbed the charges to some law company, and they didn't pay it from the pocket. So some something related to hacking. Another excerpt that I would like to share with you is, and this is very interesting, especially for Nouman as well. After doing a job, they did some hacking. The big one you see was Rhino's idea. He had heard about some kids in Sherman Oaks who almost got away with a $5 million electronic fund transfer. They hadn't hit a hang up moving the $5 million around until they tried to dump it into a personal savings account with a $40 balance. That's when all the flags went up. Now, when we are talking with each other, especially in the cybersecurity industry, they're mostly talking about the flags there. So this is something very interesting. I just wanted to share that people in the literature world sometimes generate so many ideas, and they are picked up by the smart young people, and they work on it. And smart young people, they can either use it for something good or something bad. Another thing that I would like to share with you while I was going through that is a jargon file. Now, this is a glossary of all the terms used by hackers, and this is actually kept online. And there's a term called the hacker culture. Is actually a loosely networked collection of subcultures that is nevertheless conscious of some important shared experiences, shared roots, and shared values. Now, hacker culture is basically, now hackers have grouped together to form a culture and a group of slangs are used to communicate with them. The idea behind sharing all of this interesting stuff was that if you get into the minds of hackers, then it would be very easy for the security personnel to stop them. So these were just little facts and figures I wanted to share with you. And now we will formally go on to the panel question and answer session. In this, we will be asking Nouman Saab some 3 basic questions, and we will invite the audience to add in their experience as well. Nouman Saab, are you ready?
Jay, good evening and assalamu alaikum to all of you. Yes, I'm ready, Dr. Saab. Let's proceed.
Wa alaikum assalam. Good to hear from you. So the first of the 3 questions that I would like to emphasize today is, what is the first step in assessing a security solution for a small, medium, or a full-scale academic institute?
Jay, so Dr. Saab, the first step in assessing any organization to me is to step back, and I see that you have the framework diagram there. Is to step back and see what you're trying to protect, right? And a lot of times it's data, and data could be your users' PII, or it could be intellectual property, it could be payment information, financial information, and stuff like that. So in case of a university or an academic institute, you need to step back and see what are you trying to protect. Are you trying to protect user information? Like that could include students, their profiles, their personal information, their grades, and all of that. Or is it or is it you're trying to protect your applications, like your learning management systems, your student information system, and stuff like that. So and that goes across industries. I mean, and the reason we use frameworks is for us to give us so it gives us a structured approach towards towards securing or protecting and identifying what's more important and what is the risk. Now, in case of an academic institute, like a small, medium, or full scale, you first start with identifying what needs to be protected, which is where the identify part comes in, the blue one.
Right.
And identifying, and what are we trying to identify here? We're trying to identify who are the people, users, people, employees, contractors, vendors, faculty, students, all of those. So the people factor is the most important factor, because that's what you're trying to protect, people's data. You're trying to protect, and that's what you're trying to protect from as well. Like they're people, like you said, cyberpunks. Those are people, right? Or hackers.
Right.
So you're trying to protect people from people. So you need to understand the roles. You need to understand the ecosystem on how these people get onboarded. How do they? What are their roles? Who are the stakeholders? Who are responsible for security? Who are responsible for applications and assets and all that? So that's the people part, and then you get into the technology part, which is what do you have to protect? I mean, what tools do you have to protect? And there could be all kinds of tools. There are so many tools out there, but then you need to see what is it that your institution has for the institution have for protecting these people. And then you repeat the same for the assets. You identify the assets, all the assets that the university has. This includes your information systems, your databases, your network infrastructure, your all kinds of IT assets. Anything that has an IP has to be protected, even printers, right? So you identify the list of assets, and now you have a list of people, and then you look into the processes on how do these people access, or what is the process of provisioning and deprovisioning users? What is the process of provisioning and deprovisioning hardware or assets? And how do you keep track of that? Now, once you have identified the landscape and all the components and the assets in that landscape, then you get into the protect part. Now you see how do you protect that, and that's primarily the reason we use frameworks like NIST cybersecurity framework, is because it gives us that those it's like a constitution that tells you, like, hey, you need to look into the asset inventory. And when you look into the asset inventory, now how do you create and maintain that inventory? That's the technology. You could be using any technology for that fits into your organization. You may have an existing technology that you might want to use, but at least it's highlighting the fact that, hey, you need to start with creating an inventory of your assets. Similarly, in the protect side, once you've identified that, you protect them. Like, how do I protect my users? How do I see there is some chat. Okay. So how do we identify, how do we protect users? How do we protect our systems, information systems? How do I protect my network devices, network infrastructure? How do I protect my data, whatever databases are involved, whatever files or data is structured or unstructured data is involved. So that because I have identified all of that, I know now I know what I have to protect. And then protection is usually an ongoing thing. You keep protecting or improving the protection, procedures based on the new threats that emerge. Now, once you have done enough to protect them, now you want to detect anomalies. That's where the detect part comes in. And to detect anomalies, I mean, you want to monitor what's going on with these assets. What are the users doing in those assets, right? So a user comes in there, and this is where you get more creative, and with all the tools and technologies available today, you could have machine learning in there. You could have artificial intelligence that would detect anomalies based on user behavior, or it would or any suspicious activity that is not usual. It will start flagging that. Now, when you detect such stuff, I mean, of course, I mean, these are too many activities going on, so that's where your SOC comes in. They're monitoring what gets detected, and when you monitor an activity, it could be a false positive. Like, you'd be like, yeah, Nouman works from Washington D.C. From 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., but all of a sudden he was logging in from Dubai, and yeah, Nouman was traveling. That's a false positive. That's okay, right? You let that go. But if Nouman was logging, if Nouman logged in from Washington D.C. at 8 a.m. in the morning, and 2 hours later he's logging in from Dubai, now the system will detect that as an offense. Like, it can't be that Nouman was there and 2 hours later, right? So those are the kind of anomalies you assess, and then based on that you create an incident. If the analyst or the SOC believes that this is an offense and it is indeed an incident, you create an incident, you respond to it. Now, how do you respond to it? You reach out, you either disable user account, you either call the user and verify what's going on, and so forth. But that's the respond part. And in case of a breach, I mean, and it could be anything, like a large data transfer was detected, and based on the SOC analysis, this was not okay, and you respond to it. Responding means like you recover from you either stop it from happening, or if it's already happened, you try to recover it, which is the recover part, which is in the end. So this completes the life cycle of the framework. Now, for underneath each one of them, what you will find out, and then let me see if I can share my desktop and actually uh, show it and walk you through some of the details.
Sure. Let me just stop sharing it.
Yeah. Okay, Dr. Saab, can you see my desktop now?
GG.
Okay, so for those of you that are new and are not familiar with this is Cognitive Security Manager. This is a tool developed by SPS, and we use this tool to assess an organization's state of security. And this has NIST cybersecurity framework built into it. We use that framework as our standard approach towards any security project that we do. So like we were talking about those 5 objects, there are 5 categories. In the identify part, you start with if I get into this, you will see that there are a set of tasks underneath that will determine what does it mean when we say identify. You need to identify the assets, like I was sharing. So I mean, your asset management is at the top. You need to identify the business environment, governance, risk assessment, risk strategy on how do we manage risk, and then the supply chain risk management. So once you have identified, so that's all the categories. But for each one of these, you're like, hey, what do you mean when I say identify your assets? What we mean, what it says, and this is coming from NIST. What it says is you need to identify all the physical devices and systems in your organization, all the software, all the external systems, all the resources, and your roles and responsibilities of your external organizations. Right. So underneath this, then you can have all your. Now this is where I mean, when we use this platform to assess that, we keep track of, okay, so when we say we identified physical devices and systems, here are the servers, here are the networks, here are the endpoints, there could be applications, there could be databases, and so on and so forth. So I think yeah.
Nouman, I would like to interrupt you here for a few minutes.
Sure.
You have to start from here as well. I just want to share one of the slides from the previous talk so that the audience is on board as well. So
sure, I'll stop sharing. Yeah, please go ahead.
Let me share that network diagram that we're talking about. So if the audience can see that network diagram, I hope everybody can see this.
I can see it. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Great. How about the audience here?
Yes, we can see it.
Very nice.
Yeah, we can see it.
Excellent. Because today's main objective of the talk is to indulge the audience. We are not here to talk with each other. We would like to talk with you as well. So what Nouman is trying to illustrate is that if you have a network that is shown on the screen with you, let's say we have got certain users and they are hooked up with the internet as well. So there are certain servers that keep information. So the information which is residing in some servers or information residing in their personal computers or their smartphones, and there's a person, let's say this guy, who would like to access this information, manipulate it, either for the ransomware or he just wants to play with it, just wants to steal it, and you would not like him to access that information. So that there are means of assessing the risk somewhere. So my question to Rizwan is that am I on the right track when I say when I identify the assets in our network, that those assets are physically these devices that we use to access the internet, for example, our smartphones, PCs, laptops, and the servers. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and another thing that I learned from you today was that all the applications that are running on these physical devices, for example, a database, for example, in an institute, a learning management system is very important. And there's a finance application which keeps track of all the payments done by students and payments received, fines, and things like that, and all the financial aspects of the students, faculty, and staff. Now, that application is also considered an asset. Am I right?
That's a software asset. That's correct.
That's a software asset. So when you were talking about assets, that meant hardware as well as software.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay. So if we identify these assets, how would CMS help us in identifying the risk associated with it?
Absolutely. So what happens is what CSM or any risk assessment would do is, like, you first, once you have identified the assets, you identify stakeholders, like who's responsible for this asset. So who's the asset owner, right? And then we sit down with the owner and.
Would you like to share that screen? CSM
oh yeah,
screen,
yeah.
Sorry about that.
No. Thank you for reminding me. I'm not seeing it. Okay, you see it now?
Just give me a second. Yep, I'm back. So if you help me go through those people, processes, and technology part first, then we'll move on to the asset level. But
sure. Yeah, so like I said, any asset, any organization, you start with people. And with people, you want to know, who are the people for an asset that are responsible for securely provisioning that asset? How do they operate and maintain that asset? How do they oversee and govern, protect and defend, analyze? So this is the people part. Like, I mean, this also relates to their skill set. This relates to their training on are they properly trained on doing these tasks? Right? Because after all, these are the people who are managing these assets. Are they trained on, all these areas? How do you analyze? How do you collect and operate? Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask you a question here?
Sure.
Are we talking about the people who are the end users? For example, non-technical people, for example, the faculty members. Not all the faculty members are technically equipped to run these assets, but they are users of these assets. For example, the learning management system.
Yeah.
The whole university, the whole faculty, they use learning management system all the time. So are we talking about these people as well as the IT experts who manage these servers?
So this is for the workforce, which means that people who are responsible for assets, right? Now for the end users, like your students in your case, people who are your consumers or customers, you do security awareness training, so they're aware of the security procedures and policies, but you don't expect them to protect your assets. Does that make sense?
Got it. That makes perfect sense. That means the people that need to actually overlook the security aspect, they should be provisioned enough, right?
Yes, and they should be scaled, and they should know how do they protect it. And protection means that you need to know how to securely provision a system or asset, how to maintain it, how to oversee it, protect and defend, analyze, collect, and then investigate in case of any anomalies.
Very nice. Actually, you mentioned NIST in your talk a few minutes back, and you said NIST has provided us a framework based on which this CSM actually helps us in identifying the risk and then helps us in protecting all those risks, right?
Yes.
Can you elaborate what NIST is and how does NIST come into that NICE part? Look, NIST and NICE, they are so confusing right now.
Yeah. So NIST is the organization, right? I mean, it's a National Institute of Standards and Technology, right? So NIST has a cybersecurity framework which focuses on protecting all the assets of the 5 categories that we talked about, right?
Great.
But NIST has another framework, which is NICE Workforce framework, which focuses on people,
right?
On their skills, on what is it that they need to be able to do, and what's the skill level they need, right? So NIST has different frameworks for different stuff. The two that we talked about so far is cybersecurity framework, and then the NICE framework, which is focused on people.
Excellent.
And then on the right hand side, you'll see NIST controls. Now this is more. This gets more tactical, and you can have whatever the controls you need to have in place And this pertains to your assets and the type of business you're in. Like if you're in critical infrastructure business, then these are some of the controls that you must have. And then there are nice to have controls, and then there are like optional controls that you could apply.
Excellent. What I gathered from your talk is that this tool will help the cybersecurity people to first assess their assets, and they will assess their risk by identifying the existing processes, right?
That's correct.
How would we actually put in those numbers in this software? Let's say if you want to identify some assets, how would we do that? And what are these radar-like diagrams here?
Yes. So these diagrams are really spider charts. It gives you an overall view of where do you stand right now. As let me switch to another company. This is let's use Nummel. I think we have created a profile.
A brief profile somewhere, I think.
Yeah. So yeah. But that's fine. I'll share with you what this is. So notice all those categories that we had. The first one is identify, and it's let me zoom in a little bit. It's when it says ID, that's identify asset management.
Great.
If I drill down into it, it tells me like under asset management there are these subcategories: physical devices, software platforms, and so on and so forth. Right. Now, what you want to do is like, and right now we are in the policy maturity section. So when I talk to the stakeholder who's responsible for, and these could be multiple stakeholders or multiple people that we talk to, right? Remember, we are assessing where do you stand right now. This is your state of security. So my question, and then we ask them questions on, okay, how do you rate yourself in the current the state that you have? They'll give us as is for each one, and then you of course you put in whatever the date. I mean, you're having this conversation. You tell me how do you manage your assets today, and then how should it be managed, right? We don't have it. I mean, if they say, I mean, we don't have an inventory system, or it's distributed as in silos and so on and so forth. We put in where do we stand today, and where do we want to be? We identified gaps. We put in the remediation steps, and we set some targets on when do we plan to do it. Are there any tools involved? What will be the cost of the tools? What are the services and the cost, and so on and so forth.
Excellent.
Now, when we start doing this for each one of these items, what happens is it starts creating a roadmap for us get from a point A to point B, right? And that's what you see here. The Q1. Okay. We're not going to focus on asset management or physical devices in Q1. That's something for Q2, right? What it does, it gives you a structured approach to achieving or complying with this framework to secure and protect your assets.
Excellent. So what I gather is that when you employ CSM, that removes all those complexities when you're actually assessing the complex nature of your assets. So you've got activities going on, there are people involved in it, there are so many hardware, so many applications. So what CSM helps me do is structure the assessment process so that I could look back and see how my network was back, say, in 2021 Q1. And after implementing some security policies or implementing some tools, how is it behaving now in, let's say, Q3 of 2021? Is that correct?
That's correct. And we usually do these assessments every quarter. Because that gives us time to see how are we proceeding or making progress on what we had said we would do. Now this is all based on what we get from the stakeholders, but then there is an actual feed from your existing tools. So for example, if you tell me if we are talking about people security and there is an identity and access management system on-prem, we assess that, we scan that, or we use that to see, okay, so you say you have an identity management system to protect your users, but that identity management system is protecting 10 out of your 100 applications, so there is a gap, so that goes into it. So it's more quantitative and qualitative data that we put in.
Excellent. Nouman, I would like to stop you here for a minute or so, and I would like the audience to ask any questions regarding CSM or the question that we posed earlier. Please, you're welcome to ask Nouman any question that you have.
If we are managing a university from and we are creating a network from scratch. So how we have to how we should start our implementations, especially in case of cybersecurity. We want to protect the research of our students, our faculty member. So from where we should start?
So I guess let me see if I understood the question correctly. So you mentioned that if you were setting up the network from the scratch, how would you make sure it is built from the scratch in a secure fashion? Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's correct.
So
For a university environment.
yes, yes. So again, that goes back to a larger what you're trying to do. So if you, I mean, you look at your locations, you look at your users, where they'll be coming in from, and most importantly, your assets. Are they on-prem? Are they in the cloud? And or are they distributed across different data centers? And based on that, I mean, you start designing the network and your protection tools around that. If I were to, I mean, if I were to look at an organization that has two campuses, like an institution that has two campuses, and there are different users coming in from in and out and all of that, I would design my network around that and make sure every transaction, every user that accesses every asset and whatever the network path is secure is secure to the best of industry practices.
Okay, thank you.
But it would really depend on what your overall network design is, and how and what you're trying to protect, and from what channels, like on what are there, if there are external users coming in, there are different ways of protecting that. If this is all inside and internal, then there are different ways you can protect it. But it's really important to understand the context, and there are
Yeah,
and
actually,
there are procedures you can look at, the best practices that you can look at if you have those kind of networks.
yes, thank you. Actually, we only want to protect our data and our research data from outside traffic only. That's the
Right,
only
right.
thing.
And this, I mean, I'm not sure if the data is on-prem, it's in the cloud, and if it's distributed and all of that.
It's on plan. It's
It's
on
all
plan.
on-prem. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, there are different best practices for. But if you maybe not in this session, but if you could share more details with us, I can definitely make some suggestions that or key or some critical uh, best practices that you would want to consider before you set that up.
Okay, sure.
Idrisa, you want to add in,
Ye-
Idrisa?
yes.
Didi.
Could you comment on the percentage of internal threats versus external threats? Some data shows that the majority of the uh, threats are also internal, and the assumption is that all threats are internal because there is no way to stop somebody from coming into your networks. So assume that whoever wants to steal information would already be in. So could you comment on how is the best ways practices to protect, assuming that the intruder is already in?
Yeah, Idris, that's an excellent question. And I was reading a report, and it says that about 70 to 80% of all breaches are are inside job. When you say internal threats, it could be somebody who with malicious intent, or it could be somebody who was compromised through social engineering and stuff like that. But like you pointed out, most of the threats, because somebody is coming in and stealing your data, is coming in and and spreading ransomware or spyware or whatever. Somebody inside the organization was compromised, and whether that user knows it or they don't know it, but that's where that's where most of the threats come from. Like even external threats. I mean, external threats you keep. There are plenty of zero-day threat intelligence platforms that would give you all the threats that are out there in the world as of right now. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of X-Force threat intelligence platform, and there are multiple other platforms that would give you external threats, but it's extremely hard to keep track of internal threats because that are unique to each organization, and it depends on how your endpoints are secured, how your the security awareness training for your people, your emails, your even your servers and all of that, how are they secured, and what is and that's where the zero trust architecture and principles are now becoming a big deal, because it used to be that you trust but verify, but now the world is moving towards never trust, always verify, because that is intended for your internal threats, because you don't, even if they're your admins, even if they're your executives, you cannot trust that they will not be compromised. So you do your best, and you apply the technologies and procedures to avoid or to minimize the risk of them being compromised, even if they are even if they are aware of the threats, and even if they are responsible for certain assets. I could be an admin of the applications, but I could have malware on my machine, which was unintended. So the zero trust principle focuses on internal threats, and that is why, and the reason for that is because the internal threats are way higher or more risk than the external threats. Does that answer the question, Idris? Does that make sense?
Yes. One more follow on is, assuming that we cannot stop someone from coming in. As you said, the known threats are really easy, relatively easier to identify. It's the unknown threat, right? So
Right.
unknown by definition means you don't know if somebody's already in. So wouldn't it be prudent to worry about exfiltration? That someone is, so don't allow any information to go out unless you check, double check, and triple check the authority to send that information out.
Absolutely.
Could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, yeah. So anytime, I mean, there are tools and technologies to uh, analyze the data before it goes out. And then you like you said, I mean, you check and double check and triple check on what is especially the data that is sensitive or critical enough for your organization. You protect it in a way that it's encrypted at rest, and very few people have access to it. And even when they access that data or take it out, it's checked using different technologies for exfiltration and all of that. Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question related to that. It would be considered a follow-on. Let's say if you employ such technologies that is continuously analyzing all the traffic that is going in and outside the network, wouldn't that slow down the traffic?
Dr. Saad, yeah.
Didi.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's why you classify the data. You start with classifying what's most important to me or to the organization, and you apply most controls over that data. But if somebody is looking at your marketing flyers or whatever, or some data that's not as sensitive, then I wouldn't be checking all of the data. Yeah, you're right. If you start monitoring and double checking and triple checking everything that comes in and out, yeah, it will have a performance impact. But you want to, and then that's the decision organizations make. Like, if this data is important enough for me to absorb the performance impact, then you go for it. It's really
Excellent.
the your risk score that defines what you want to do.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, another pertaining question. Sorry, any more questions from the audience?
Idris, did you have any other questions? I think you were asking some good questions.
No, I think there are two or three things that have come up in the last 20 years, and I think one would have to see how they have evolved into, like Dr. Arshad said, this is warfare, right? And so we started with alerts, simple alerts, then we started with firewalls and protections, and now we're at the, every few years, a new threats and threat protection mechanisms come in. What is your, or do you have any opinion on how storing data using blockchain would mitigate some of the known threats?
Yes, yes. So I think like you pointed out, in the last 2 decades, things have changed, data has changed, and some of the technologies that we used to, like, we used to have data sitting all on-prem. There would be like very few people having access to it, and then we would do all kinds of data center specific protection tools and technologies to protect it. But now the data is this data is spread across regions, sometimes countries. If you have data on the cloud, whatever. I mean, and then there are all kinds of people accessing that data. So yeah, the trends have changed. The challenges have changed, and then they're depending on the data that you're trying to protect and who you're trying to protect from, and the nature of the organization and the sensitivity of the data. I mean, yeah, blockchain would help mitigate some of that. I mean, we've in the last few years, actually, I mean, what we have seen is, like, a lot of this data is now sitting on the endpoints. I mean, whether we realize it or not, our cell phones have a lot of critical data about our organizations and customers and consumers. So because data is now distributed across all these platforms, not just a central storage or a central data center. Now, I mean, I personally think all these endpoint protection plays a role. Your server protection plays a role. Your network plays a role. So all of this have some kind of data either moving between them or being stored between them. So for each one of these, what you and depending, again, it really depends on the nature of business and the industry you're in. You may want to see where all this data gets to, and then you start protecting those areas based on the sensitivity of the data.
That makes perfect sense. Idrisa, does it make sense to you?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Because I have a question to ask as well, if you allow me to.
Sure, please.
Yeah, sorry, we do have only 5 minutes remaining, so just wanted to alert you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hashim. But I think this is an interesting discussion that has stemmed up.
Yeah,
that's the whole idea, right? I will just ask a question, and Idrisa, you can also add your question into it so that Nouman can answer both. As a layman person from an academic institute, we are actually thinking of moving all our assets to the cloud by implementing a campus management system which incorporates all those LMSs and all those applications. And what I understand from the previous discussion is that even if you move all your assets to the cloud, you are still vulnerable, and in fact you are making your assets more vulnerable as well as more difficult to protect as compared to your on-premises assets. Now, that is just one question, and Idrisa, you can add it.
Let's take an example of badges, right? We used to have buildings, we used to have badges, and we were assuming that the person with the badge would come in, swipe the badge, and come into the building and try to protect the building. Now that badge is useless if the person is remotely logging in. So, like you said, the problem has moved from a facility to an endpoint. Now you've got a person, and the argument that if I logged in from Dubai now and Hungary tomorrow, that's actually passé. I could pose to be from, if once I know who I'm trying to hack, I could pose to be calling from Dubai, even if I'm in Hungary. So those are very rudimentary, simple things that have already been solved. I think focus should be on what needs to be solved next, because quite a few things have already been solved and also cracked. So assuming that whatever has been solved in the last 10 years is also cracked, what's next would be my question. I apologize, it's kind of lengthy question.
No, Idris, that's perfectly fine. I think what the example that you shared. I mean, yeah, there are things that have been cracked, but then there are growing and emerging threats that are coming in. Like in the past, like I was talking about zero trust, right? I mean, what happens is uh, the, the, because of the nature of the environments that we're in, there are all kinds of users coming in to access a certain data from that data could be anywhere. The question is, how do you protect that data from who's accessing it, and how do you verify if that access is legit, right? So I think, and what some of the things that are some of the new threats are really related to, really verifying the user. Like, I mean, yeah, like you said, I could be impersonating. I'm in Hungary right now. I'm in Singapore, and some of the and that's I think blockchain does play a role there. It does, some of the the authentication and the user verification systems could be are now being addressed using blockchain technologies. It's also, there are plenty of other like multi-factor authentications and also biometrics that are now coming into play. So I think to summarize, I know this is a lot deeper topic than the time that we have right now, but I think with some of the technologies that are available today, if we leverage those, and we can never be 100% secure, of course, but we can definitely reduce the risks that come along with those transactions. Does that make sense so far? I mean, I know that this is we don't have much time here, but we can. Well, this is definitely interesting topics, and if we were to drill down into it and break it down into certain scenarios, I think we will definitely have great ideas coming in.
Thank you.
Nouman and Hashim, why don't we take this discussion for the next session? Why don't we start discussing from this point onward?
Gee, certainly. I mean, we can do that.
Right. Can I, over to Hashim Saab, you can wind the session up, please. Thank you very much.
Gee, sure. So first of all, thank you, Dr. Saad, for suggesting this idea and taking leadership in coming up with the questions. And thank you, Nouman, for your availability and of course some really interesting questions from the audience, especially Idrisa. So, Dr. Arshad, would you care to share some closing comments?
Dr. You're muted.
Dr. Arshad, would you care to share some closing comments before we call off this meeting? I think you may be on another call, but I think again this was a great session, and we are also working on some exciting stuff regarding cybersecurity certifications in universities on a large scale. So stay tuned, keep checking your emails. The next session is going to be on AI, where we have a speaker who will be sharing on on the machine learning aspects related to agri-tech and certain other industries. And that's because, as we were discussing, everything is so interconnected. So cybersecurity and AI and IoT and cloud. So if you're interested, you're welcome to join that. And the next cybersecurity session would be 4 weeks from now. We do have set aside a separate sub-session under this SEG where we look in even more detail on how a university campus can be secure. And this sub-session happens on the first Tuesday of each month. So the next one is going to happen on the 6th of July. So with this, I do want to hear from some of the new participants here. Mr. Mohammed Azim, I know you asked some really good questions. Would you care to share the university that you're from and your interest in cybersecurity specifically? Ji Mohammed Azim, you're on mute.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Ji. Would you care to share the university that you're from?
Sir, currently I'm working at the Green International University at Lahore, basically.
So the Green International University?
Yeah, it's under the platform of the University of Faisalabad.
Okay. Got it. So, all right.
If you
Sure. And Azim sir, by the way, do share your email address in the chat, please. Actually, I'll what I'll do is I'll share my email address for because a lot of time audience is trying to reach out to me and then chat gets disabled. So if anybody has any questions, please reach out to us at this email ID that I just pasted in the chat window, and so that we can connect after this. So with this, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Dr. Saad, Nouman, and thank you, Dr. Arshad for leading this activity for SPINN Labs. Good evening, and to those in Pakistan, and good morning, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you and Allah.
Thank you, Hashim, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. And we would love to have Idris Saab and Azim Saab in our next session as well. Please do join us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sir, I'll be available, and I just shared my email, so you can add me at the group. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Hashim. Thank you, Dr. Arshad Saab. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, Arshad. Thank you.